So we are here today for our webinar on how to model your world in 3D with your phone. We will be waiting for a couple of minutes for people to sign up. And let me just pull up the interface to see how many people are. Okay, so we have about 25 people already signed in, so I guess we can get started. So welcome everybody. My name is Vishal Sachdev. I'm an instructor in the College of Business at the University of Illinois and also the director of the Maker Lab. So today our webinar is a part of our series that goes on in parallel to our online 3D printing course, and we call ourselves the 3D Printing Profs, and I'll introduce you to a couple of others of the team that teaches this course in a minute. But if you are in this webinar and you haven't checked out our course, you can just search for 3dprintingprofs.com. You'll find us, and you'll find links to all the courses that we've set up. So we already have the first 3 courses out there. So that's 3D Printing Revolution, taught by Professor Eric Randfish, who's on the call today, 3D Printing Applications, which I teach, and 3D Printing Software, which is taught by Jeff Smith from Autodesk. And in fact, this webinar on scanning is placed, the content is placed inside the 3D Printing Software course. He also might join us today, but he's not here yet. So let me go ahead and introduce our panelists for today. So first and foremost, Jean-Michel, who's the CEO and founder of TRNIO. I don't know, Jan, if I said that right.
You said it perfectly.
So we are actually using, recommending to our learners this app for the, at least for the iPhone, and another app for the Androids. So he's kindly agreed to join us to give us some tips and tricks about doing a better job at our scans. And Jeffrey Smith, as I said, from Autodesk, who might join us a little bit later. And then we have Professor Eric Randfish, who's a professor in marketing and teaching the first course in the series. Before we come to Jean-Michel, Eric, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Vishal. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. And thank you, Jean-Michel, for sharing your knowledge with our learners. As Vishal mentioned, we have offered this new specialization on 3D printing through the Coursera platform. I want to point out that all of the content can be obtained for free. If you'd like to earn a certificate, there's a low monthly subscription of $49, in which you will not just get a certificate, but also if you're in certain countries, like the US, Canada, Japan, or Korea, actually get your money back on a discount on a Ultimaker printer, if you so choose to do so. And so really enthused by it. We have a great reception so far. We've been out for a bit less than a year. And across the 3 courses combined, we have over 20,000 learners around the world. Wow. And our goal is to teach the world how to 3D print. And this webinar is a nice example of the value add that we try to provide to our learners that go beyond just the Coursera platform. So I'm really excited to hear about this great new scanning tool that Jean-Michel has developed.
Thank you, Eric. And for those of you who've joined, you can use the chat to sort of tell us who you are, where you're from. Are you in the course already? Are you new to the course? And perhaps your interests in 3D printing or scanning in particular. So over to you, Jean-Michel. Give us, give us a little background on yourself and how did you come about developing this app?
Yeah, so my name is Jean-Michel, founder of Tourneo. We started Tourneo about 3 years ago. My background was more on the mechanical robotics engineering side. And so one of the questions that we always had was, how do you go about scanning the world in 3D so you can start making usable 3D models? as we progressed, we started looking at, photogrammetry and other types of technology out there. And we kind of said what's the easiest and best way for any user to create 3D? And that's kind of where Tourneo started. What Tourneo is basically 3D scanning software that takes any photos and converts it into a 3D model. The way we do that is by providing users with an iOS app. And the app itself guides a user to scan an object. And it allows the user either to manually take images or to use automated features on the phone to take images. From there, the images are sent to our servers to where we basically create 3D models. So the tricks from it is, because we're using images, is we need to focus on the quality of the images and what the output is to create a good 3D model. So I guess, is that clear enough?
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I know in the course people have been using the app. I know we tried 123D Catch earlier, and unfortunately that got shut down.
Yeah.
And since then we've been recommending your app and another app for the Android. And some of the learners have come back with a few questions about how to do this better, a few bugs here and there. And now you've been working at the back end to fix many of those.
Okay, perfect. So I can go through the tutorials that we had.
Okay.
And to show what good and bad images cause in terms of 3D models, and how to always get a good 3D scan.
Okay. So I'll stop my screen sharing, and then you can perhaps put up your slides to show on the screen.
Okay. And then, can everybody see this?
Yeah, it looks good. Yeah.
Okay. So what I wanted to show is basically I took the same object and I scanned it in the good way and in the bad way, and then I'll walk through what the effects of the following four have on the quality of the scan. So the first one is the effect of lighting on the scan quality. And what I mean by that is if you take an image indoors versus outdoors, you get different levels of lighting, and you get also different levels of noise that affect those images. So we'll go through that. The best recommendation I have is to always shoot outside if you can, and to always shoot on cloudy days. That just happens to be the perfect lighting. The second one is, and I've seen this, I do this a lot when you're in a pinch, is plan your scan. How do you go about, you need to go around the whole object. And so how do you go about planning that? Do you shoot indoors on like the coffee table where there's like a chair or something like that that you're going to have to move halfway through? Or do you take the object outside, or do you clear paths around it? So that's what I mean by that part. And I'll show examples there. The third one is most objects that people are scanning are objects that do not have the best texture. So we do that with vases. We do it with metallic objects. You can do it with cars. You can do it with pens or whatever. And our job as scanners is to create a really good 3D scan. So by placing newspapers or magazines at the base, that's one an example of how you can improve the scan by putting props into the scan to make it more readable by our software. And then this last one, I'll show a couple of examples on how noisy backgrounds can actually reduce the scan quality. And what I mean by noisy backgrounds is, being outside shooting a person and there's a forest behind you. So there's a lot of like trees with leaves and they're all moving. So this is noise that can detract from the object that you're trying to scan. Are there any questions so far before we go into it?
Sorry.
No.
Yeah, no questions so far.
Okay. Okay, so what I shot was, and this was yesterday about 5 o'clock. It's a statue that, this is a good example, and I'll show the images later. But what I wanted to highlight is I shot this outdoors, and in the images, all the images that I had ISO ratings of less than 100. For what we've seen is we've seen a high correlation between ISO rating and the quality of a scan. So the ISO rating means is when you have a lower ISO rating, it basically reduces the noise that you get in an image. And for us, at least on our software, lower ISO ratings usually means really good quality scans. And then the second part about this is I placed this object on a table and I made sure it had a clear path. And then as you can see on the left image, we used a magazine as a base so that we can assist with getting a better quality. Here are all the images that we took from this. There was 28 images in total, and I basically kept the object centered as I went around, and I did a full 360. This was using the Tourneo automated capture. So the only thing I had to do was really just walk around slowly and then make sure that the object was centered of the capture. Okay. If you look at all the images, you'll see that the lighting is pretty consistent, and you also see that the object always remains in focus.
Yeah.
So then I took the same object and I placed this, as I've seen it's a lot of objects being scanned, is I placed this on a kitchen counter. It had there was no magazine underneath, and it was shot with the kitchen light on. And so here the lighting was inconsistent, and the shots was shot indoors, and the ISO rating was over 300. The object was placed on a counter, so I couldn't go around the whole object, so I had to twirl the phone, and I didn't see the object for half the scan. And then I also, used the white counter as a base. So you can see right here is going from the good scan, where we had the complete 360, all the way to here, we only get the arm. Okay.
Yeah.
So, if what the counter does is when you're going around an object, it forces the user to, let's see if I can move this. It forces the user to kind of throw the iPhone out, and you can see in the middle images around this that the images get darker. This is caused by the lighting, and then also they start to get out of focus. Okay, so I just want to show, while it looks like you're creating a good scan, there's a lot of times when it's just hard to keep the object in focus.
Okay.
So now let's, are there any questions so far? I'm going to start talking about the lighting.
No questions right now.
Okay. Photogrammetry uses images, and we match between one image to the next image. For us to do so correctly, we need to have a sharp image of an object. And so when you get lighting, when you have bad lighting and you have high ISO, that ends up making the image a little bit blurrier when you zoom in, versus when you have good lighting, you'll see this on the right, you'll have a clear image. And so the clearer the image, the better that we can capture the scan. So are you able to see the blurriness?
Yeah, on the one on the left, right?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I'm curious, the one that you've labeled as good seems to have a lighting from one angle only, and there's a shadow on the other side. That doesn't affect the image quality?
No, it doesn't, as long as we're able to distinguish between like shadows. Okay. So it's, for us, it's more about the actual lighting. And actually, by the end of this month, we've been testing some other stuff with machine learning that actually removes shadowing together.
Nice.
So it'll help us actually increase the quality a little bit more.
Okay.
But so what this does is this one is just showing that the lighting happens and that there is a difference. And even though you're taking a picture with bad lighting, the one on the left we usually get most of the time. So then next is in photogrammetry, the first thing that we have to do when we take pictures is we have to calculate where the user was taking pictures from. And this is the first step to creating the 3D model. If we don't know where an image was taken, we're not able to calculate where the 3D model is, and then we're not able to create the 3D model. So what the magazine does is it actually allows us anchor points that we can easily distinguish between one image to the next to the next. And so by placing the magazine on the bottom, you're actually able to see, for example, on the right, you can see that most of the points that we took, most of the points that we captured on the first initial scan were points of the magazine. Okay, on the left, this was the capture that was done on the counter table, and there was no texture underneath. And most of the points that we captured were of the statue. The statue is mostly white and it's mostly consistent. Even though there's some texture, it ends up causing issues. So if we can't capture the camera positions, we're unable to figure out where the rest of the model is. So this is going back to, this again was the bad one, and you can see, okay. So one of the questions was, why does putting a magazine down help? It helps, so I'm gonna go back to the images. It helps by, if you look at these images right here, objects that have a lot of color, that have a lot of like contrast, are easily able to be recognized from one image to the next image. Even just by looking at this, these pictures right here, I know where the burger is in each one of these pictures. So if I can tell, then our algorithms can tell.
Okay.
So so we use feature detection. I guess let me see if I can. I want to go to. Okay, I think I lost. I'm going to do a new share to my desktop, and then I'll show an example. Are you able to see my desktop?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing that we do, and this is a different picture. Yes, Tourneo is free. So the first thing that we do when we take pictures, we actually match points between an image to the next image. The better the image, the better the point is, the more contrast. So in this case, you'll see a person's face. The eyes are easy to distinguish, the nose, and what we're doing is getting points between images, and then from there we can get camera positions. So by placing the magazine, that allows us to get something that's sharp and nice, so that you can go from one image to the next. When you don't have that, then it's hard for us to actually find commonality between images. Okay. And then the other question is how to choose ISO. The ISO of an image is completely based on brightness of your surroundings. So if you shoot indoors, the camera automatically chooses the ISO rating. Unless you have a camera with manual adjustment, then you can change it. But for the most part, for most iPhones or most cameras, it's automatically chosen. When there's darker light, the camera automatically increases the ISO rating, so to let more light in. When there's good lighting like this, the camera will reduce automatically the ISO rating down to 50 or 60, and you can already see the difference in quality. Okay. Are we clear on that part so far? Or are there any other questions about that part?
I think that looks okay. Somebody had a question about the smallest and the biggest object that can be scanned.
Okay.
Daniel, yeah.
Okay, well, that's a good question. So we're able to, we've scanned larger objects. We, for the Tourneo app itself, using the automated feature, I recommend something as like, you know, a human face. So something maybe 12 inches, maybe 20 inches seems to be pretty good. It's more dependent on the quality of the texture, but also the Tourneo, the current like limitations on it is more on thinness of an object. For example, it's harder for us to scan really thin pens, objects with wires and those kind of things. We also tend not to scan things that are really small, like 3 inches or below. It's just a little bit, unfortunately, because of the way the camera sensor is, we don't get enough information from it. Okay. So. Next, what I wanted to show is about 50% of the people that scan on Tourneo actually scan people. So I wanted to show an example of a good 3D scan of a person. And then, you know, is the lighting still okay for me?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay. And kind of show what I did to scan my friend John right here. This is using an iPhone 5. And it shows like what the effects of good lighting with good background can affect on the model. These are the images right here. You can see John remains centered. He didn't also move. I took, I guess 18 images. And I went from the front to the left and right, and I went a little bit underneath the chin. What I did right here is made sure that 1, the lighting was good, so we were outside, it was a cloudy day. And then 2, the background, we kept the background simple, so he was close to a wall. And then the third part is that we kept him in focus most of the time. And so you can see here that the mesh ends up turning out pretty good. And, you know, from here, I can take this into another software and then create a 3D model from it and get it ready for 3D printing or something like that.
So how does the, I mean, the camera app compare with the, you know, other desktop scanners like the Sense, which, you know, use a dedicated hardware and then, you know, create the mesh and then also prep it for 3D printing?
Well, the main difference that, you know, we're going to have lower resolution at some of those, but I think the main thing that's nice is that, you know, we give you the freedom to scan anything. So you can go out and, you know, you can go scan a person, you can go scan a statue and those kind of things. The quality and the resolution are completely correlated on the quality of your image and the texture that you have. And so what I'll show you is not this one. I'll show you my friend's John face. And in this, for 3D printing, it might be good enough for most applications. So it really depends on like the quality that you need. So the one thing that I have seen some users ask is they ask if we actually are scaled correctly, and unfortunately we're not. So if this is 1 inch here, it's not going to be 1 inch in real life, and that's where some of these other scanners like get accurate positioning.
Okay.
So one of the questions was, I didn't need to make a picture from the back to close to 3D. On this object, this one does not have a full 360. So I was using it for something else, but you can see is if you wanted to create a 3D model that's full 360, you would have to take it into another software and add a base on this one. Okay, so now if there's not any more questions on the generic stuff, what I wanted to do is go through some of the specific things that we had seen in Tourneo.
Okay.
I get a bunch of questions on these. So
okay.
Are there any other questions on?
Muhammad had a question about using video to do the scans. I'm guessing that's not possible. It's only images, right?
Yeah, only images right now. We've been testing. We actually have a new product that we're testing video coming out. So if that works, we'll go ahead and incorporate that into this this pipeline.
Okay.
So so one of the things that I've seen people have some issues with is the scanning screen. So I wanted to show, we talked about lighting and ISO and noise quite a bit. And whether you use Tourneo as automated scanning or you want to import images, and I'll show that later on, the bottom light meter right here is a very good indicator of light. So we actually are reading the ISO rating of the image that we capture, and from there along with a couple other things. And when this is at 3/4 or full, we get really good images. So when you start to see this at 1 or 2 or 3, keep in mind that you have to move slower and you have to walk around really slow, and you still might not get a really good quality scan. So the higher that this value is, the better the chance that you get a good scan. And then the second one, it's a hidden feature, is if you're going around an object and you feel like you're losing focus, if you tap the center screen, it actually refocuses the camera. And this will help with the image quality as you move around. That's something that we didn't really advertise, but it's a nice feature that I use all the time. And then the other question that I had is one of the things that we have some people that like to take images from their camera app. So they use actual a camera to just capture images on themselves. And then they want to have a way of importing those images into some 3D software. So I just wanted to highlight that if you click on the right menu bar, you'll see this import images. And then from there you can click on the camera roll. And afterwards you can select images, and then we actually process them like we would any images from the camera app. The thing that we have to be cognizant here is that you're in charge of overlap. So you want to make sure that objects in at least 3 images, and you want to make sure that, again, that the lighting's good and the object's always focused, and that you're getting enough coverage on all the areas that you want to have scanned. So, and I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, Yeah, we are open for questions on the chat. So if see, we have about 30 people here. So if you have questions, please post that in the chat, and we'll take them as they come in. I had one question. I mean, in terms of sort of roadmap, are you looking at an Android app as well?
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're looking to get that released by summertime.
Okay.
It might be in the middle. We on our roadmap, we have a couple things that we're focusing. Right now, we're this month we've been testing some machine learning for to improve our quality and also like make us less affected by shadows. So that's something that's coming up. And then afterwards, we're releasing another iOS app shortly. But after that's done, then we'll be releasing an Android version of the regular Tourneo app. So if there's actually any input on what features people want, that'll be good to just email us.
Sure. I think we can probably set up a thread in the course itself, because it's a lot of people, you know, quite a few. We have a global audience, only about, you know, I don't have a breakup of how many have Android phones, but I'm guessing quite a few do. So they'll probably have good feedback.
Yeah. One thing that we might look at is actually making a web version of at least the portal, so that we can like upload images and download the 3D model.
Yeah.
So if that helps.
Sure.
Is there a minimum requirement for iOS? Right now, I believe it's iOS 8. I believe it works all the way down to iPhone 5. For iPhone 5, I recommend using the import images, as it's a little bit less buggy and less taxing on the phone. But that's a minimum. The format of the scan. So there's the output that we do from in Tourneo, you have the ability to email yourself the link. Right now there's a bug, so sometimes you have to email it twice. But what you get is once you get the link, there's an output that's a model.zip, and here I'll go through the whole process. So you get the model.zip right here, and that's a model.ply. I recommend using, am I still showing my screen?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I recommend using MeshLab to open this file. MeshLab is a free program. So what I do is now I'm going to open the model.ply with MeshLab. And this is the model that I get. Okay. It has texture. I can turn that off or on the left. And you can see that the texture itself is pretty decent. I shot this a little bit further away, so we could probably got a little more quality if we zoomed in. But this is what the model that you get. From there, if you want to use it in Mesh Mixer or any other Autodesk formats, what you have to do is go to File, Export Mesh As, and then you select the format you want. So if you do an OBJ, I can do OBJ model. And it goes through, here's some flags that for us, if you want to keep the texture, make sure that this one's on, the wedge text chord. You can turn off the other ones if you want. And now what I've done is I've actually saved this model as an OBJ. And so this OBJ can be used in any sorts of like Blender, Mesh Mixer, or other like 3D software. I can click on that one itself, and then for me, I have MeshLab opening it. But you can see that this OBJ is the exact same copy of the PLY that we have. So we output PLY, but using MeshLab, you can export it to OBJ or STL or any other type of format.
Okay. Yeah, so I think a couple of questions on post-processing. So I've directed learners to some of our videos in the software course as well, where there are tips on doing the post-processing. And
okay, well, one thing I can show is how I would do this processing of this one.
okay.
I'll go through it as if I'm going to put a base on it, the first thing I'm doing is I'm opening up in MeshLab. Okay, and then from there is what I need to do is, I want to select just a closer area. So what I do, this is software I use just for very basic crude stuff, is I select the area that I want by clicking on this middle button right here, select faces in a rectangular surface. So you can go through, and this works for any type of object. You go through there, and then afterwards, you have to go to Filter, Selection, Invert Selection, Apply, and now what that's done is actually it's selected all the vertices outside of the box that I did. Okay. Then after that is I go to this button right here, which is to delete the current set of faces, and I delete them all. And after I do that, then now I'll do an export mesh as, and I'll save this as an OBJ. And then I do OBJ model. The format is OBJ. And so that's an example of initial steps. And then afterwards, then you can bring it into other softwares to add a base or to close the back or to make sure that's watertight. And I think that's where your rest of the class works.
Yeah.
So, and then just to close, I open up this model right here, and at least you have something that's a little bit easier to manipulate.
Yeah.
So
we have, we'll take one last question, I believe. Let me see if I was missing. There was, from Sasha, there was a question on any minimum specs on the lens on your phone, or do regular, phones will do the job?
Regular phones can do the job. The one thing that what I wanted to show is, I had one other example of lighting after this. The one thing that's nice with iPhone or with like mobile phone cameras is that the lens is really small. And I think you guys covered this also. But what it does is when you look at this image, you'll see that most of the back as well as the front of the object is in focus. When you use a Canon or like a Nikon camera with the lens and you're focusing on this object, most of those larger lenses will cause the background to be unfocused. So it's easier to create a 3D scan with a mobile phone, but if you are using a high quality camera, you just always want to make sure that the object that you're scanning is in focus, and you'll have the background out of focus.
So. Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's some good tips.
One thing I wanted to show is we talked about lighting. We talked about the effects of lighting. The last part that this is a mistake I did, so I know a lot of people are doing it also. I was outside and I shot this statue. And a lot of times we can't control what we do. So if you look through the images, I did the full 360, but you can already see that the center of the head had bright light, and the reason why is it was getting close to sunset. So what happens is we're okay here, and we're actually able to create the 3D model. But when you get closer to facing the sun, this is where we have issues. And you'll start to see how the sun affects the camera itself. Okay, so you see the lens flare that's being caused by the camera. So this is one thing to also keep in mind when you're going around capturing scans, especially outdoors. And I think it's just an issue that we have with Tourneo, just for the fact that, like, you know, we gave an app that you can use anywhere, and one of the issues is, you know, people use it anywhere and everywhere, and sometimes you can't control your environment. But you know, when this happens, you just have to try to make sure you shoot away from the sun, or shoot when it's a little bit cloudier. But you can kind of see what happens there. We were still able to create this 3D model, but on the top of the head, we weren't able to get the full 3D head. So what happens then is you see a little bubbling right here.
Yeah.
So that was the last thing I wanted to show, but for the most part, the mesh is still pretty good. But you can see right there is where the sunlight started to hit, that we get this little weird thing. So, and I think that's all the examples I had.
Great, great. Well, thank you for you know, sharing all these tips, and I will get back to the screen on my computer here. So to all those who've joined, thank you for joining us. And if you haven't you know, tried the course yet, you can just search for 3D printing profs and you'll find us. And John Michael, thank you so much for taking the time out. Eric, did you have any sort of closing thoughts?
I just had a couple of questions for John Michael. One is, so your company's been around for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Where is this technology headed? I mean, how different would this you know, photogrammetry-based app look, say, in 2020?
Well, I think where we're heading is, you know, there's going to be, right now we're scanning a bunch of things. Anytime you scan something, you're starting from ground zero, in terms of, like, you're taking images, you're putting them together, and then you're taking 3D models. You're creating a 3D model from that. The way I see 3D scanning as a utility is more of converting itself into object recognition. And, you know, if everybody's scanning the same MacBook Pro, there's no reason to recreate the whole 3D model. So instead, it's more of, how do I quickly find out what object that you have is, and then from there is, how do I get you that 3D model? And how do I paint the pictures that you have? Because one person has a sticker and the other person doesn't, so that that object looks like the one that you scanned versus the one that, you know, so-and-so, like somebody else scanned. And so it's more of a question of, you know, what information can I extract from this stuff, so that you can get back a 3D model in 5 seconds or something, as opposed to, like, you know, 2 or 3 or 5 minutes. So that's how I see that part. And then I also see just 3D scanning more as providing more utility, so that, you know, right now users, if they want to do 3D printing or those kind of things, there's still a lot of, like, steps that you have to take from the 3D scan onto that. So, you know, being able to, you know, take a 3D scan, do something to where you minimize, like, the number of polygons that you have in the scan, and you know, flatten everything out. You make everything circular and make, doing that whole step to where, the thing is completely 3D printable right away. I think that's another huge step.
And finally, as a business school professor, I see your app is free. What is the business model? How do you guys do business?
Yeah, so we're actually releasing. We're taking this first step to doing more of the object recognition side. So we're focusing on the 3D avatar, and we're releasing an app shortly that will take your face from video and convert that into a 3D animated avatar in about 15 seconds.
Wow.
And so this is the first step that we see is, how do you start to provide, I guess, utility to 3D models? Because now once you have the avatar, you can do expressions, you can do all sorts of things. And so that's going to be the first monetizable product that we have.
Okay.
So
well, really cool stuff, and best of luck with this, and we appreciate all of your contributions to our specialization.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on board. So it was a good webinar. And then, yeah, if there's any feedback or anything else, we can be reached at marketing@Tourneo or feedback@Tourneo.
Okay, I just typed those down, and I think the slides that you used during the webinar, and of course the video recording also goes inside the course, and we also share the tips and tricks on the slides with our learners inside the course as well.
Okay, sounds good.
Yep. So thank you so much again, and thank you all of those who are here participating in the webinar, and we hope to see you in the course if you're not already enrolled. And to those of you who are in there, stay with us. The hardware course will be launching soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.